what you really need is some innovative and creativity. Even John, I would challenge from the payer side of literally doing something here, because if you think about what you want the end result is, you want more of these tests. But you want them to be valid, you want them to be useful, you want to basically have that database that you're talking about. I don't think it's going to come from the government side. I know you do, Scott. No, I'm just kidding. It's not going to come from the government side, and I really think this is an opportunity to do something really big that actually, if I look at it from a disease like cancer, that really increases the diagnostic ability and as you well know, John, in terms of the treatment of it as well, too. So, that would be my challenge here.
It is interesting. The debate over the regulation of these LDTs has been going on for probably 15 years, really. I mean, when I came to FDA in 2003, we were having this discussion. They actually had a policy drafted up that doesn't look much different than the one they have right now and how they intended to regulate this space. And the thinking back then during the Bush administration was, well, we would carve out a subset of these tests that presented the most complexity and sort of fell outside the CLIA scheme, and that was these multivariate tests. Back then, they weren't doing the genome screening like they're doing now. The whole genome, they were doing whole genome arrays, but not the sequencing. But the intention was that would be what was regulated first, because that was the most complex. It fell outside the framework of CLIA. CLIA really couldn't provide clinical validity of those tests. Now FDA seems to be going back to the presumption that, well, we actually want to regulate the entire field with some kind of risk-based scheme. What do you think the politics of that is? Why would they not want to carve out a smaller subset of these tests where they might have had the most public health concerns and demonstrate their ability to regulate this field, as opposed to trying to step in and do the entire space at once?
Well, I think there have been companies, I think the FDA put it into writing themselves, that one of the reasons that they came to this point has been because of problems around validity, utility. And then I do think, we haven't talked about this state of I'm curious from payer, patient, and access standpoint, recent regulations in the state of Arizona where now patients can initiate the ordering of this test. So I think you've seen a storm of sorts where the market's changed. So I think that's the political pressure, is that we now have a state. I've been curious as to how many patients are even aware in the state of Arizona that this is something they could do and would take advantage of it. But I think that's why you're seeing the intersection. That's just kind of my opinion. And I think you're seeing an administration, remember, we're in 2015. This is kind of the end of an administration. And I think they're trying to, this is the time, as Ted mentioned, resources are scarce. But if you can put the imprint that this is something that the FDA should be doing, it'll likely have repercussions even in a different political administration. If the FDA starts this process, which they have, they'll have to see it through to some degree, and that's just how bureaucracies work.
And don't you think, Kavita, some of the media attention too has been a prompting? I mean, not to get into politics, but when you have the media attention, when you have these stories, FDA went up the day before the House hearing on the Energy and Commerce Committee, and they gave 20 stories that basically happened over 10 years, and they're bad, but I mean,
but they're 20 stories over 10 years.
But they're 20 stories over 10 years. When I saw it, I said, that's not a big sample, when you think about it, but those stories.
But they weren't.
But if you read some of them, they're bad stories.
Right.
And so I think that's part of what's prompting this too, as well too, in terms of the media around it. We've got to do something about it.
Right.
And I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But again, I don't think the solution is going to be on the regulatory side, the government side. I think this is going to take something that is a consortium of payers, even providers getting together and really doing something neat in addition to CLIA modernizing and basically coming up to speed.
Right. And then there's a question of whether or not, even if the FDA goes forward with a guidance in the space, could they re-regulate this entire space with guidance? Do they have to promulgate regulations? Will it take new statutes? Right. They're going to get sued by the industry. Right. And they've been setting up to sue the agency. So given that this guidance was ready to go at the end of the Bush administration, got held up in the Office of Management and Budget, it's been circulating around the Obama administration. We all know that. The FDA has wanted to get this out for years. Do you really think they get it out in the sort of waning days of administration, basically 1 year left? Could they get this out?
I think that they could if they put their minds to it, but I think it's going to be hard because this is not, it's certainly top of mind because we're discussing it and there's a lot of media attention to it, but there's so many things that this administration wants to get out in the kind of last mile. So I would say, I'm not a betting person, but I would say it's still a 50-50 shot that this gets done.
I wouldn't give it 50-50. I'd be
What would you
more
give
on
it?
the 40-35 that it will happen, if you will. I think just the
pretty
politics are too tough when you
Right,
think
right.
about 2016 being an election year,
Right.
and everything that's going on in the world as well too. I think it's going to be really tough.